now. So greetings, everyone. Welcome to the February 2018 Central East Regional Presidents and Leaders Roundtable. It's great to be with you all again today. Thank you all for coming out and being here today. I'm really excited about our program today because it's something that I like leaders to be able to be aware of, hoping you never need it. But when you do need it, it's not something you need to wait. You need to try and find out then. So we're gonna engage with that in a few minutes. But as always, we're gonna start off with a chalice lighting, and our chalice lighting today. There's just a quote from. People know that I have a love of using the readings from our hymnal because I think we often don't recognize the beauty that is here, and it's just a piece in all of the things that have been happening in the world and all the divisions that have been happening in people. There's a quote that's just been with me this past week from our hymnal. It's one of the quotes that, in my other ministry as a military chaplain, it's one of the quotes that my soldiers, when they get a hold of the UU hymnal, they find it and bring it to me. And it's this one, it's number 661. We have a great deal more kindness than is ever spoken. The whole human family is bathed with an element of love like a fine ether. How many persons we meet in houses whom we scarcely speak to, whom yet we honor and who honor us? How many we see in the street or sit with in church, whom, though silently, we warmly rejoice to be with? Read the language of these wandering eye-beams. The heart knoweth. Ralph Waldo Emerson. So it is wonderful to be with you. These calls that we have, the purpose of this call is that once a month we come together to offer just a regular chance for congregational leaders to be able to connect with your UUA Central East Regional staff. And there's two members of our staff on the call today, so I'm letting somebody else know. I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves in a few minutes. To share a few good ideas monthly with all congregational presidents and leadership. And, last year we brought in people who were from the Central East Regional staff to present. And our goal this year has been to bring in people from our national staff, from our offices in Boston to be able to present. And we're doing that again today. To build community among the leaders of the congregations of the Central East region so that you all can begin to know who each other is, at least by your voice, and realize that there are Unitarian Universalists in 200 congregations across our region. And for the Central East Regional staff to hear directly from congregations what's important to you, so it helps us to aid in developing programming and training. That's the goal that we have for this call that we do every month, this teleconference. So our agenda, the chalice lighting and welcome, to remind each other of the purpose of the call. Introducing our featured field staff, which we'll do in a minute with Heather Bond. So we'll talk about some great resources from the UUA. We'll talk about this month the UUA Misconduct Reporting Process and we'll go deeper into that. And Heather's got some things she's going to share around that as well. And then we want to know if there's a difficult history that you're aware of in your congregation. One of the things that I have encountered over and over is that congregations that have something challenging and difficult in their past think they're alone in that. And what I know as regional staff is that they're not. And so what I'm hoping is, without laying out any confidences or anything that is too live in a congregation, just for us to see that this is something that congregations experience, and that no congregation is alone in experiencing a time of such difficulty with a professional, religious professional or staff person. And then we'll have some closing words. So usually this call goes about 90 minutes. But I'm going to start with, though, kind of our little roll call. Now, it would take too long to go through every congregation to see who all is here. I'm going to invite you all to type into the chat if you want what congregation you're from. But first off, everybody can unmute themselves. And who's here from Virginia? There's a few people. I see Bob's waving, a couple of people. Anybody else? Pete Fontenot. Anybody here from Maryland?
Yeah.
Here. Yes.
See, you got some Maryland people here. Anybody from DC? I was with some DC congregations this weekend, so I know they're there, but they're not here. Anybody from New Jersey? New Jersey? I don't know what it is. They don't like this call. Anybody here from Delaware besides me?
That's me.
Yay, I see Amber and I see Linda waving, yes. Anybody here from New York?
Yay!
How about Pennsylvania?
Yes, I'm here.
We do, yay. For the entire state, Christine is here.
I hid myself, though, and I don't know how to unhide myself, but I'm here.
Well, we can hear you just fine. So, anybody here from Ohio? No Ohio today. How about West Virginia? And anybody here from our couple of congregations in Connecticut? No. Okay. So we got a good feel for who's here. We're kind of in the South and East today this time. So, but once again, we have this call in part because a good number of the people who attend are able to. And if you could remute yourself, a good number of people attend, but also there are quite a few people who watch the video online each month. So. The next thing we'll do is we'll introduce our Central East Regional staff. So I'm going to take us off share for a second, and I'm going to invite the Reverend Dr. Hope Johnson to introduce herself and tell herself a little bit about what her role is on the Central East Regional staff.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be on this call. I serve as Congregational Life Consultant for the Central East Region. My areas of specialization are conflict transformation and cross-cultural engagement. And I've been doing this work for a long time. I just love it. I also serve as a minister for the congregation in Garden City, Long Island. And so I have two parts that make a whole at this time.
And you are the primary contact for the congregations on Long Island, right?
Primary contact for the congregations on Long Island, yes.
Right.
And I'm glad to be here, not because I have to be, but because I said, David, can I come too? I always learn so much from these calls. So I'm glad to be here.
She texted me like 10 minutes ago. Of course you can come. Right? So it's great to have you here. We got other people putting in where they're from in the chat, and that's wonderful to see that. Thank you all for doing that. It's a new addition. So a little bit about who I am. My name is the Reverend David Pyle. Usually the Reverend comes up when somebody needs something. I am the primary contact for the congregations of the Delmarva Peninsula, of Central Pennsylvania, and of Greater Baltimore. I am also your governance program manager, so that's boards and bylaws and committees, the arts of ministry program manager, that's committees on ministries and worship and pastoral care. And I am the coordinator for the adjunct consultant program, where lay leaders like yourself come to help other congregations. And I also am one half of our large church team, serving the specific needs of congregations of 550 members or less. And I'm going to say this. This is going to be coming out in an article next week that we're going to be sending, but I am going on unpaid leave from the UUA staff beginning on July 1st. I'll be gone for 1 year. The UUA is going to hire an interim minister they're going to hire an interim to be in my role for that year that I'm gone. The reason for this is I am being called up as an Army Reserve chaplain and deployed to the Middle East. So I can't speak about the details of it, but it is let's just say they've chosen me. It's a voluntold, not a volunteer, and they've chosen me for a position that's actually about 2 levels above my current pay grade. But I'll say it. I get to go be the command chaplain for all medical operations in the Middle East for 9 months. So it is a big responsibility, and the UUA is going to have someone in my role for that time that I'm gone. So with that, what I would like to do is transition us to our introducing. This is not where you're going to present yet, Heather, but we're just going to ask you to introduce yourself, our guest presenter from the UUA staff, and talk about your role and your position a bit, and what are the multiple titles that you have, and if you could share a little bit about your role with our association.
Sure. Okay, well, my name is Heather Bond, and my title is complicated. It's the Budget and Safe Congregations Manager for the Congregational Life Staff Group in the UUA. So it's a very long title, and I don't use it most of the time because it's way too complicated. But basically, I have days like this where I'm doing budgets all day long because it's budget season, and then I get to join you good people and talk about the misconduct process. So we'll go into it more later, but that's basically who I am and what I spend my days doing.
And because I think it's an important thing, Heather, I'm going to draw something out. For your faith tradition, which faith tradition are you from in your own spiritual call and development?
I'm actually UCC. So that's where you saw I did a shout out to Laura, because Laura was our music ministry at South Church, where I go still. And I was actually I was asked to do this. I had been the budget manager for a couple of years, and the powers that be came and asked me if I would be willing to do this work, because particularly the intake work on the complaint calls, because I was not a UU. Right.
That was what I was getting at.
Yes.
I
don't know who any of your ministers are, and I don't care. so it means I don't have any worries about stepping on anybody's toes.
There we go. It's just that, and for those that don't know, because I think everybody knows, but I don't assume, UCC is the United Church of Christ.
Right.
So anyway, thank you, Heather. I'm going to go back to screen share for a minute. There we go. And talk about I usually then here we talk about events, and we're not in the past meetings. I've decided to stop going in and walking you all through the calendar each time we come together, because you all now know where the calendar is and you can go look at it. But instead, to pick a couple of things that I want to highlight each month that are resources that you may not be aware of. And so here is where the calendar is, that one of the, and I'm actually looking at possibly next month having our events coordinator come on to talk about how your congregation, can put events that are happening in your congregation that you'd like other congregations to be aware of, how you can put that on the Central East Regional calendar yourself. We've developed a process where you can apply to have your congregation's events that you want to have broader participation from on the Central East Regional calendar. But the two resources that I wanted to talk about this month, one of them is I'm bringing back from last month, just because I think it's an important one. But the first one to do is we have brand new on the web as of this week, Central East Regional resource pages. Now, what we've been doing over the last, I think it's been about 9 months, is the members of the Central East Regional staff have been curating a set of resources on different congregational issues and areas. If you've ever been into a library or a bookstore and you've seen the shelf of each staff person's favorite picks, that's kind of what we've tried to create in different areas of congregational, is to curate through resources for the things that we think we would love you to have easy access to. And we've created resource pages on UUA.org for those from the Central East region. So there are areas, I'm going to show them to you in a second, there are areas such as governance, communication, stewardship, leadership development, conflict transformation, safe congregations, large congregations, multicultural welcome. There's quite a few others. And I just want to take a second and show you a bit about what these look like. So here, can you all see the web page? Nod if you can see the web page. All right. Here's what it looks like. It's at u.org Central East resources topics. If you go to just the Central East page and click on resources and then resources by topic, you can get there. And you can see arts of ministry, communications and social media, congregations as good employer, congregational stewardship, developing leaders. You see all these: conflict transformation, difficult conversations, authentic welcome, and scroll down. All of these are resources that we've curated and created to be among everything that's available, what we think is most vital for congregational leaders to engage with. I'm going to show you the one on governance and decision making, one, because it's one of mine, and also because these are board and and presidents. So in the governance and decision-making page, there's a little article, the little intro there, but a whole set of resources. There is a very, very awkward video of me talking about my love of congregational bylaws and how we could do those better. I will tell you, it is as awkward as you can imagine it's possibly going to be. There's also a great video of Dan Hotchkiss talking about, the different levels, the different parts of effective governance. And they're just examples of some of the resources that we've been able to collect and collate. But you see, one of the articles that's new that we've been working on for a while was how to right-size a governing board. In particular, an article thinking about, do small congregations need to have the same size board as large congregations, right? Or are there ways to think through, if you've only got a congregation of 53 members and you have a 9-person board, how many people of your congregation, basically a fifth of your congregation is on the board at any one particular time. So rethinking board size based in some relationship to size of congregation and style. So those are some of the kinds of articles that are available, and I'm going to show you another one real fast. That's not mine, but because we have her with us, we have the wonderful conflict transformation resources page by the Reverend Dr. Hope Johnson. So, just to be able to see some of the resources that are available for your congregation and to know this is here, because I think Hope would agree with me, you kind of need to build the muscle memory for how to do conflict well in a congregation before you have a conflict, right?
Absolutely. And
absolutely.
Most important things is, as it's escalating, you want to be sure that you sense it, you do some things to avoid the big level 4 or 5 crisis. So that's a big thing.
And it's one of the great lessons is that, in Unitarian Universalism, you've heard me say this before, we invite people to come into these congregations and invest their deepest values and beliefs, and we don't require they agree on much of anything else. So I have a belief that doing conflict well is the spiritual practice of Unitarian Universalism. Doing how we disagree in love is at the center of who we are. So just to name that these resources are here, and there's a question in the chat that I can't see at the moment. Hang on one second. And I don't know why that's happening. I will come back and check the chat in just a second, and I will come back and answer any questions we can at that time. So with that, the other resource that I wanted to name, just to make sure what you were aware of, is our Safe Congregations resources. And just by a show of hands of how many people are on video, how many of you know your congregation has a Safe Congregations policy? Raise your hand if you can. So quite a few of you do. It is become, there was a time that was not true, that we've done a lot of work in the association, but to realize that there are wonderful resources that are available on UUA.org, both to implement and also to be able to deal with times where there is a challenge related to safe congregations in your congregation. And just to name this one of the easiest websites to be able to find on UUA.org is UUA.org/safe. And notice we'll send these links out with the video when the video comes out in a couple of days. So with that, I'm going to move us to.
Except I'm not a registered attendee.
And if you could mute when you're not speaking, that would be helpful, either on your phone or on I can mute people online, but if you can mute while you're on your phone, that would be helpful. So what I would like to do is, I believe, Heather, you have a PowerPoint that you'd like to share and be able to use, right? So I'm going to make you, do you need me to make you the host to share your PowerPoint? I didn't think you did. So Heather, the floor is yours. And you're still muted.
Boy, I really thought I had taken that off, but there you go.
And the floor is now yours, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to keep an eye on the chat because I won't be able to see it when I'm doing all this. So if somebody has a question or you need to interrupt me for anything, please go ahead and do that. And
there are no questions in the chat just yet, so go ahead.
good. All right, hang on. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble getting this slideshow going. So hang on. Sorry. It doesn't seem to want to show the slide without everything else. I don't quite understand why. I don't know. But anyway, we'll figure it out. I'm not as good at this as David is.
There we go. We got it.
There I am. Okay, good. So here we are. Let's see, let me get these back up here just so that I can click through it. There you go. Thank you. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the safe congregations, and then we'll do a little bit more with misconduct. And then I do have some more on actually putting together a safe congregation policy if we get to it, but if we don't, that's okay, that's fine. So I wanted to first introduce you to my team. These are the 5 regions, and I have one person from every team is on my, one person from every region is on my team. We have a safer congregation team. We meet regularly, and we actually have trainings once a year for 3 days. We get together and do a training on one thing or another. We've done all kinds of stuff on after pastor, on the how to deal with a sex offender coming to your church, you name it. We've had training in it. So, so we do have these people, so it's not just me. We have other people who can help you out if you need that. And then this is just to show you when a call comes in to me, these are all the different things that can happen. I don't expect you to even be able to read it, and that's fine. You don't need to be able to read it. I just want to show you, my only aim in showing this to you is that it's not black and white what's happening. It's never black and white what's happening when I get a call for the Office of Ethics and Safety. I never know for sure what I'm getting into. The basic breakdown is that there are advice calls, there's congregational conflict calls, and then over here in the green is the misconduct. And that, you can see there's this big red X. That's because I'm the only one that handles misconduct. All the regional people don't. They handle all this other stuff, which is wonderful. But if there's a misconduct call, it just does come to me. And then I'm the one who deals with it from that point on. And in general, we've found, and of course there's always exceptions, but in general, we found that most complaint calls that come in about ministerial misconduct, I'm talking about religious professional misconduct. It doesn't always have to be a minister, but it is religious professional misconduct, generally fall into 4 categories. They have merit, they don't have merit, they have merit but they're old. That's a special category. And they have merit, but it's really sort of a misjudgment or questionable behavior, but maybe it's not quite as bad as a misconduct. So, so a call comes in and it sort of gets into these categories. And let me explain to you what I mean, because you're going to say, well, why would somebody call and it doesn't have merit? So I'm going to just tell you a story. I had a call from a lovely woman about 2 years ago who was absolutely sure her minister was coming on to her. I mean, totally, absolutely sure that everything he said was a message to her that he was coming on to her. When I dug deeper into this, she was 73, he was 42, and he was sending her signals through his sermons. Well, you get a call like that, and then you have to start thinking, okay, you want to be really compassionate about this, and you want to make sure that her issue gets dealt with, but there are other ways of doing it, not through the misconduct process, because that's not where this complaint needs to go. This complaint needs to be told back to the minister to find out what's going on from his point of view. So I just wanted to let you know that's the kind of things that I get. I get that kind of stuff on a fairly regular basis. That was one of the more interesting examples. But so that's what I mean by when something doesn't have merit. Also, things that don't have merit, you know, the minister said something mean to me. Well, yeah, sometimes ministers get fed up with people who interrupt them all the time, and they ask them if they would please sit down for a while and let somebody else talk. That doesn't mean that it's misconduct. So I'm always having to sort of parse things out like that. That has merit, but over 10 years old. That used to honestly be a harder line than it is now. Over the last year, particularly with Me Too coming out, we've actually loosened up on our requirements about that at all. That used to be that we always talked about it, but there was a feeling that if there had been no further misconduct, perhaps we didn't need to do anything. And now, honestly, feelings about that have changed. So we take this on a case-by-case basis. And then when you have something that is misjudgment or questionable behavior, that one of the best examples I have of that is that we had a minister who went off on somebody on Facebook. I mean, they went off. I mean, it was not pretty. It was a one-time event. They never did it again, mostly because we made sure they got sat down and said if they ever did it again, it would not be just a minor thing. So that's the kind of misjudgment or questionable behavior that we don't generally take to misconduct, but we could have if it had continued to repeat. So there's a lot of gray areas in all of this. Once you go to has merit, then we start the formal complaint process.
So Heather, this is David. Can I ask you a quick question? Could you talk
Sure.
a little about what misconduct usually entails and how it relates to the UUMA guidelines?
Right, exactly. Sorry about that. I'm so used to it, I forgot to say that. Oh, misconduct is basically the code of ethical standards that's published in the UUMA. That's not the UUMA website. Not the code of ethics, but there's a code of ethical behavior and a code of conduct. Those two things put together are what we use as if those have been violated, that is misconduct.
And all of us ministers have, as part of being a UU minister within the UU Ministers Association, have affirmed that we will follow those ethical guidelines as part of being a member of the UUMA. So,
Right. And the Loretta has now adopted a code of ethics. So now, actually, if there is a certified DRE that has a credentialed DRE, who someone believes has misconducted, we have a standard of conduct with which to handle that misconduct complaint, which we didn't for a while. Music is getting there. Being a credentialed music director, they're working on it too. So pretty soon it's going to be any credentialed religious professional you will be able to file a misconduct complaint on. But it does take the organizations to set up the standards before we have something we can work with. So does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so yes, one of these things is not like the other. The misconduct process is separate. It starts either with a call to the Safe Congregations line or to the email safecongregations@uua.org. Sometimes they call the front desk and they just get sent to me, which is fine too. That's fine, however they get to me. Anyone who calls or emails me, that first conversation, then I usually arrange for a time to talk. That first conversation is confidential. They don't have to worry about it being reported to anybody because I don't do that unless I sense there's some sort of, if I believe there's, and I tell them this up front, if I feel like there's any kind of physical harm going to be happening, well then there's no confidentiality there. So once we've had an initial conversation, many times they'll say they need to think about it and they'll call me back. Many times they're ready to move forward. They've been thinking about it for a while. But in either case, the one resource that I offer to everyone who calls that gets past this is a complaint that the minister looked at me funny, that I have a resource, the advocates, that I can offer them. Hope Johnson is involved with the advocates. We have a team of about 9 people. Barbara Koyman, who's in, I think I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I'm sorry. Who is in Lancaster now, is one of our advocates. So you've got one in Surge. I have about 9 scattered out throughout the country, and they are trained. We went to a 3-day workshop in Wisconsin where we were trained by some experts, and we have regular quarterly training to keep up on things and to talk about the best way to file complaints, stuff like that. And they're a great bunch of people.
What is the advocate's role?
And what the advocates do is thank you, David. What they do is they accompany a complainant through the whole process, including even you don't have to have decided you're going to file a complaint. If you're even just really needing to figure out, do I really have a complaint here? That's still a valid use of an advocate. And so basically that's the second person that anybody who calls to complaint talks to, is an advocate. I assign them. I usually put out basically an email, a call, saying who's got time to deal with this particular situation. Some people who call to complain want they want a person of color, or they want a woman, or they want so that narrows down the email that I send. But out of 9, I generally have about 4 working at a time. So I usually have a pretty good choice of people. And they're all wonderfully trained and wonderful at this. They're a companion. They're not a therapist. That's not their role, but they're a companion in the process. And they've been particularly trained to sort out the story in the complaint, because often the story is long, but the complaint is really small. What is it that really violated that code of conduct? Because that's the complaint. Everything else may be super important to the complainant that calls, and they may need to talk about it to me, to the advocate, to everybody they talk to. But the complaint is quite possible is that much of that big of a story. So the advocates are trained to help a person figure out what is the actual complaint, what is the violation of the code, of the standards of conduct, help them put it together, and then if it's done, once it's done, it gets sent to me. And then we have 2 investigative consultants. They're both women. One is a retired UU minister, and the other one is a UU minister who was a chaplain for years and is a person of color. And so one of them gets the complaint, and they actually start an investigative process, which can take a while, honestly. I always warn people, don't think this is going to be done tomorrow, because it could take a while. They have to do a whole investigation. They have to talk to everybody involved. At that point in time, if you decide to file a complaint, while we keep it confidential within the system of the UUA, the fact is it isn't confidential to the person you're complaining about anymore, because they have a right to read the complaint and they have a right to reply and to answer. So usually there's 2 back and forths. The person that's complained about gets to read the complaint, gets to do an answer. The original complainant gets to answer that, and then the person gets to answer that one. So there's 2 back and forths generally. Then the investigator writes up a report, and they're generally pretty clear by the time they're done. Yes, this was a clear violation of the standards of conduct, or, well, there's some gray areas here and it wasn't well done, but perhaps we could work with them in some ways, or there really isn't a complaint here after all. So there's different ways that can go. So let me see.
So I have a quick question to ask, Heather. I hope it's okay that I'm asking questions.
No, I want you to ask, because
Yeah,
actually I think I've sort of run out of steam on a complaint.
Well, and my question is here: who can be a complainant?
Oh,
You know, in different circumstances, who is it that files complaints in different circumstances?
it actually has to be the entity that was personally harmed. And the reason why we don't take secondhand complaints, but the reason why I say entity and not person is because we do occasionally get a complaint of fiscal misconduct from a board. That's possible because the congregation was what was harmed. But as far as sexual misconduct or bullying or just bad behavior, that has to be a first person. We don't take second person complaints. You can't call up and say, I know that he did this to somebody else in the congregation.
But if the board experienced the, let's say, emotional misconduct, the bullying behavior, then the board itself, because their first person experience of it, they could be the ones to file a complaint about that.
They would have to file it under their names, though.
Under their individual names, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a complaint come in that had 6 names on it, but it was filed under their individual names.
And the exception to that really is forms of financial misconduct, where the institution is the one that is harmed. Is that right?
Yeah, unless there's another way that the board says the institution was harmed, but I haven't seen another one besides fiscal that was true with.
So is there, at this point, while we've got Heather in a stop, is there any questions anyone has at this point that you'd like to ask? One is, question from Carrie McElway is, how can you become an advocate? What's the criteria?
Actually, Sarah Lammert, who's the head of MFD, the Ministerial of Faith Development, I'm sorry, we're so used to all these acronyms. Can't even say that right. She is the person I would just write her an email, slammert@uua.org, and tell her that you're interested in becoming an advocate and why. And she keeps names because we have had people who have not been able to keep doing it. We actually started with 12 and we're down to 9. It does take this big training, though, this big initial training. And so usually that's only about every 3 or 4 years that we bring on new people, because we all meet again together, and the people who've already had the training get refreshed, and the people who are new get the training, get that basic training down. But that's how you get on it.
Is there any particular criteria that they look for in people who are advocates?
I'm just thinking. About half of our advocates are ministers, but the other half are have been lay leaders in their congregation. A couple of them are psychotherapists, but not all. I have one guy who was an emergency medical doctor. He runs a ER. But he's been very involved in his congregation. He's a lay leader, and was involved with a situation that happened in his own church.
So it sounds like it's pretty personalized to what the individual brings, right?
It really is. Yeah.
Any other questions that anyone has? Here's a question from, I think it's Christine. Is it misconduct if one feels a minister is being irresponsible or negligent? So the line between, misconduct and negligence. Can you speak to that, Heather? And Linda Sanders says she has to leave to take her grandson to the ER for a peanut allergy.
Oh no, I'm sorry. That's no fun. If someone called me saying that their minister was being negligent, or I would honestly, David, I would send them to you first. I would send them to the regional staff first and say, let's see if we can't get this minister to get his act in gear.
And that is one of the work lines between us, and this has happened, where it is not a violation of the code of professional practice, but it is something that's probably not good practice, right?
Right,
That's not.
exactly.
That's the line where it kind of comes back to the regional staff to engage with that minister and be in more of a coaching role, so that they do that whatever it is better. And
Right.
we wanted to make sure that we all knew that this was hypothetical and not about their minister.
All
So,
right. Right.
Thank you. And there's something I can't see, and Heather's not able to see messages sent to her, but apparently there was a message sent to her from Bob Hatfield that
Okay.
she thought you might read.
Okay.
Is that read it aloud, Bob, or not? Bob, I think, said yes, read it aloud if you could. Did you find it?
I don't know if I can get to it.
Bob, could you just come mute and ask the question?
Hi, Bob.
Bob's not able to unmute. So
he's
Bob, if you chat it to me, Bob, I'll read it in a minute. So Heather, I stopped you for questions, but you still have more to present. So
yes, this is pretty much the complaint process. It's not
well, what happens with a complaint if it's judged to be valid?
I was just going to say, then what happens is to wind up, when the investigative report comes back, their job isn't to decide what to do with the complainant and the minister or religious professional. Their job is simply to lay out the facts that yes, this happened. Yes, there was financial misconduct. Or no, there wasn't. And then it goes to Sarah and the MFC to decide what to do with it.
And the MFC?
The MFC is the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, and they're the people who actually interview potential ministers and confer fellowship on ministers. And the investigative report, Sarah takes it to the executive committee of the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, and they review it. And they have a bunch of options, actually. If they find that it wasn't egregious, but it was borderline, they can mandate counseling for 2 years. They can suspend fellowship. They don't have to terminate it. They can terminate it. They have actually a fair amount of, they can do different things. They don't have to just terminate fellowship. There are other things that they can do. So that's really up to them. I'm not involved in that at all.
You're in the reporting and the investigative side.
Yeah. Once the report comes in and it's on Sarah's desk, she'll tell me, just to be nice, what happened, but I don't have anything to do with it at all.
And could you share a little bit about who the MFC is? I mean, I can if you can't, but well, I'll just say that the MFC is both ministers and lay leaders.
Yes.
That are selected by the General Assembly to be in the role of kind of the gatekeepers for our ministry, for who is qualified and fellowshipped to be serving as a fellowshipped Unitarian Universalist minister. Right. And so it is not just ministers in that
No.
It is ministers and lay leaders together. And it is not, the decisions are not made by staff. No. So UUA staff do not have a voting role in what the adjudication, what the decisions are of the ministerial fellowship committees. The staff members that are involved, Sarah Lambert and others, are there just to support.
They're there to support. Sarah is technically the secretary of the executive board, but she's a non-voting member. She doesn't vote. So it really is the fellowship, the ministerial fellowship committee, that is the one who decides these things, not staff.
So do we want, are there any more slides, Heather, or is that where we are?
I have slides about just general other stuff about safe congregations, but I'm happy to stop right here as well.
So let's see, are there any other questions for Heather on the misconduct reporting process? And like I said, one of the reasons why I bring this, I wanted Heather to come on and talk about it, is because it's both complex and it's direct. It's both complex and it's simple, right? But one of the things that's hard for people to understand is that when a complaint of misconduct by a religious professional happens, it comes out of the regional staff's role. And for most congregations, people tell me all the time, to them, I am the UUA, right? Because who they see is the regional staff. But we very intentionally move this to a different part of our association because of the close relationships that regional staff have with the congregational leadership and boards. So I wanted to name that it moves to another place. Are there any questions for Heather about the misconduct reporting process?
Bob, did you figure out did you get your question to David, or?
I don't think Bob's got his sound turned on as part of the problem.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I can't get to the chat with my screen share on.
We'll take screen share off for a minute and let's see what happens.
All right.
Then we get to look at each other a bit more.
There you go. Where is it? Here we go.
So if you could read Bob's question.
Is that all right if I read it, Bob, or you want me to answer it later?
Yes, he gives you the thumbs
Okay to read? Okay. Your discussion on misconduct is interesting and important. My present focus is on building security, which is part of your portfolio. I was energized in part by the Sunday security article in the current UU World, and certainly by the horrific gun violence in churches and schools over the last year. I think we are about to start a task force to look at our campus vulnerabilities as a checklist of what gaps need to be closed. Yes, that's.
So can you talk a little bit about safe congregations then with that?
Yes, I can talk a little bit about safe congregations. Yes. Let me actually start my slide share again and find those slides, because I do actually have some slides on that.
And I'm also going to ask you just at the end to talk a little bit about how we're helping congregations navigate what's occurring around the Me Too movement and some of the things that have come up around that.
Okay.
So there's a complaint about someone who's not a religious professional.
Okay. Right. Okay.
But safe congregations first. Thank you for letting me kind of stage manage a bit, Heather.
Oh, no, I'm happy to have you do it. All right, here we go. So these are common questions that we at the Safer Congregation team, which is myself and the regional representatives. A person on the sex offender registry wants to attend our church. We're having a conflict with an older new member. Is it okay if adult members friend youth? Vandals pulled down our Black Lives Matter banner. What can we do to make sure our building is safe? Our small church can't manage 2 unrelated adults in a classroom. What other ways can we handle this situation? One of our professional staff is in conflict with somebody. These are really typical questions. We're used to answering these. If this is the kind of question you've got, give us a call. We're glad to help you out. Every congregation, safe congregation policy should have a safer congregation policy, which is mostly about RE and children, a disruptive persons policy or a disruptive behavior policy, and a building safety policy. We actually did a survey at the certification last year, so 2 certifications ago, and we asked how many congregations have a safe congregation policy. Well, 70% said yes. This year we dug into that and we said, what does your safe congregation policy have? Is it for RE, where you've got 2 people in a classroom? Do you have building safety? Do you check your insurance every other year? We gave them a checklist. And honestly, I'm still waiting for that to get tabulated and to me, so I don't have the results of it yet. But we would imagine that the vast majority of people have done a really good job with RE. They've made sure they have glass in the door. They've made sure they have a 2-adult rule. Maybe they've done a really good job with youth, but they have not done so well with disruptive behavior and building safety policy. So this is just, your safe congregation policy does not need to be big. And this year, we have not only completely revised the section on youth, but we have also revised the whole section on building safety. This is actually new. We just got it up right before Christmas. We are also in the process of revising the Safe Congregation online workshop and the disruptive behavior pages so that they are updated and easier to use and navigate through. So definitely check out the building safety. There's a whole section in there about gun safety, by the way. It's not a policy if no one knows it's there. I have an awful lot of people I am at GA. I sit at the booth at the UUA Expressway practically the whole time. And I ask people, do you have a safe congregation policy? And they say, I don't know. And I said, well, if you don't know, then it doesn't matter if you have one, does it? So it needs to be read and signed off on. It needs to be reviewed every few years. And you don't have to publish everything on the website, but you should at least publish the important parts on the website. And honestly, you should have a safer congregation response team that can easily be brought together in an emergency. That's actually a key, and even small congregations can do this.
Can you give an example of what kind of emergency would be that you'd bring the team together for?
Yes, you have found out, the minister it's been reported to the minister that you have a sex offender, as one of your members is on the sex offender registry list. That's something that needs to be dealt with immediately. And the minister can pull together their team, their crisis team, their emergency team, their safe congregation team, whatever you want to call it, and they can put together a response to that problem quickly.
And you go to that because it's a problem that occurs with some frequency in our congregations.
It's one of the most frequently, we're one of the few churches that doesn't just turn away sex offenders. And it's because we have a good policy. We have a really good method we put in limited access agreements, depending on, we make sure that we advise that you talk to parole officers and therapists, which means you have to get permission. It's a little bit work intensive, but because we do try to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person, our congregations are more willing to do that than almost any other denomination around. So we actually get more, and parole officers love it because there's actually wonderful statistics about if a sex offender is held accountable by a church to a limited access agreement, if they are held accountable, it's like a 93% rate of non-recidivism. So, I mean, it's huge. So parole officers love it when one of their people gets in one of our churches. But of course, they can't do that without the limited access agreement and without the whole rigmarole. And that takes people.
That rigmarole is something that your regional staff can help you to be able to do. And one of the things I wanted to say at a point is, Heather's named that there is a team of at least one person in every region who is trained and experienced. Mm-hmm. In our region, that is Patricia Infante. Mm-hmm. Am I right about that, Heather?
Yes, you are.
Patricia Infante, who many of you all know, sometimes goes by Pat. And campus security, campus sanctuary. Campus sanctuary, threats by persons with guns. UU World article suggests early warning observers in a parking lot. Okay, talk about early warning observers in a parking lot and entryway prior to. We got it, Bob. Thank you.
Right, and we have, and we are working now on adding a little mini workshop on training your greeters on how to keep an eye out on things. So that should be up soon. I mean, you don't want to get too crazy, but you need to be cautious and you need to be safe.
So the big thing, Bob, is take a look at that new resource that's on the uua.org/safe, and they can help you take a look.
And then on the left-hand side, go to building safety, and it's there. Like I say, we have a whole section on guns you can get to from there, including policies of people who have in Texas, churches in Texas who have done. Who have set no guns policies. And in Texas, you actually have to post it. You have to put a sign on your lawn that says that no guns are allowed in the congregation. So just think about that for a while.
And just saying, Christine says that her congregation is also looking at building security and getting trained for active shooter and other emergencies right now.
Okay. I would just, obviously this is hot button, I would just say real quick, watch out for online technology policies. Think about that. Think about what you're doing with that. And then these are some really good resources, which I can send this out later. Where's the one? There you go. Building safety. Review your insurance every 3rd year upon renewal. You should do a building audit every 5 years. You should practice your fire drills a minimum of once a year. And your committees and boards should come up with a plan of what to do if you have a shooter, and you should practice it. You can tell the congregation you're doing a fire drill, and in your brain be doing a, what would I be doing differently with this if this was a shooter that came in?
I'll tell you, one of the things I saw a congregation do that I loved was when they did their fire drill, when they did their leaving the building drill, what they did was in the place where everyone was supposed to gather, they set up big tables with all kinds of donuts and pastries and desserts, so that it got linked into people's mind that that's where you go, because that's where the dessert party is, right? So just to name, you can actually do it in ways that are fun and engaging and are really open-hearted and very you.
Well, I'll just, Laura, I'm sure, has heard this story, but we do a play every year. And one year we were in the middle of the play and the fire alarm went off, and everybody just said, oh, it's just the fire alarm, and nobody left. The fire department was so mad. Oh my God, they came in, you know, because they came in with all their boots and their things, and they yelled at everybody and made us stop the play, and everybody had to get out. But that was a real lesson, boy. I've never done that again. Oh, that was pretty funny. So I would recommend on building safety that you don't just come up with a plan on your own on what to do with an active shooter, that you work with your police department. And if your police department, which I've had this inquiries about this, my police department says they don't have anybody or they're not going to help us, ask them for the school resource officer, because they'll do it. They will come. If you contact him directly, he will come, she will come, and go through the building with you and say, this area is a problem, you could get bottlenecked here, or this is something you need to think about here. They will do that. Church Mutual will also do it. Church Mutual, there's a link on our site. They have a whole online training program for active shooters. It's called ALICE, which stands for something I can't remember right now. But they have a whole online workshop that we link to on our site that will train you what to do with an active shooter. So there are a lot of resources out there, and you'll find a lot of them linked from our site. And I will say Church Mutual is great. Church Mutual has so many resources. It's just wonderful. And that's it. I'm done.
So if you could take us off screen share, and just before we come into doing some more conversation, if you could just share a little bit about what's been some of the congregation's experience related to the Me Too movement and in the last 6 months or so.
It's been an interesting season, because when we have had a real uptick in calls, unfortunately, a lot of them have been congregant to congregant. There's not a whole lot we can actually do about congregant versus congregant. If there's any kind of proof at all, I suggest they go to the police and file a report. It's a hard thing there, and I tell them they really need to get counseling about it too. And I tell ministers, ministers aren't trained for this kind of work. And most ministers aren't. And it's great if they do one session. That's great. But after that, hopefully with their pastoral care fund, they can afford to send the person to another outside person for actual real work. Because there's just not a whole lot we can do about congregate to congregate. Now, we have had some calls come in that they were misconduct calls, religious, professional misconduct calls that came in. Some of them were old, which we are looking, that's one of the things that's changed our minds about these claims that are 10 years old. We are indeed looking at them seriously. Some of them are calls that we just never would have gotten before because they're more the harassing rather than actual rape. But we're getting calls on them now, and I'm glad. So we're sort of working our way through those.
And go ahead, Heather.
Well, I just wanted to say one of the interesting things that's happened is that we were getting enough of them, and so I just want to throw this out there. We were getting enough of them that even I honestly just couldn't deal with it, to be honest. I just couldn't deal with it. So we actually asked the advocates, would you be willing to take some of these calls? Because, I mean, it's not, a complaint's not going to come out of it, but these people need somebody to talk to. And they said, yes, they would. And they have. And they've taken several. And they're good with it. They're good with it. So if you have one, if your minister's having issues dealing with one that's a congregate to congregant, tell them to call me and I'll see if I can't get them hooked up with an advocate to at least talk about what the issue is. Like I say, we're not mental health counselors, but we can do that first session to say, you do need, some of them just need to get it off their chest, and some of them, no, they really need to be in therapy to get over this. They've got PTSD, they've got other issues.
And there's a question from Carrie McElway, but before I ask that one, I want to say this. One of the things that it's highlighted for us, for regional staff, is the key importance of having a disruptive persons policy in your congregation.
Absolutely.
When someone is sexually harassing someone else or has sexual assaulted someone, and you do not have a policy base by which you can restrict or remove them from the congregation, the congregational leadership is then in a completely reactive mode without a base, and can often be triangulated in very difficult ways. It becomes about the person, not about the behavior, and that's a terrible place for a congregational board to be. And
right.
So if one of the lessons that we've learned from the Me Too movement over the last 9 months has been really 6 to 9 months has really been that the key importance of a disruptive persons policy for congregations to have.
Right.
Question from Carrie McElway is, do you send those people to local victim services shelters? So that's a little odd, but I think that do we recommend them to local services that are in the area where they are?
Yeah.
We do? Is that?
We do.
Yeah.
Well, we recommend that. I mean, we recommend that.
And can help make those connections with them. Domestic violence shelters are staffed with qualified to take crisis calls even when they're not looking for shelter. Carrie confirms. So yeah, I do know that the advocates do research what is available in a local area and help connect that person to those resources.
But we do also hope that the church has thought about this enough to have some local resources that they know, because honestly, I'm in Boston. I don't know what all the different resources are out there in the country. And the advocates may know, like if I've got one in Tennessee, he may know where his are. But so we do rely on churches to have that information that they can send their people to.
So any other questions before I ask we have about 25 minutes left. And I just wanted to make sure there's two things I'm going to say, Heather, and we'll still have questions. But number one, we don't get to celebrate Heather for the work that she does for our association very often. And it is very difficult work that we are better for having Heather in this role. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
What other
says
question?
amen. Hope
What?
says amen to that. I second that motion.
And the same with the advocates. And you know, Barbara Koyeman, who is one of our advocates that serves in the Central East region, has also said to me that if there is a congregation that would find it useful to have a conversation with an advocate, she's willing to have that conversation at any time at any particular place. So you can either reach out through Heather, or you can reach out through me or another member of the regional staff, and we can connect you with the Reverend Barbara Koyeman, who is the developmental minister in Lancaster, Pennsylvania at the moment. So any other questions for Heather?
David, can I just highlight the word that Heather used before? I think she used the word accompany.
Yes, right.
I just want to say how important that is as a first step. Just knowing that if you have a problem, an issue, there is someone designated to just accompany you.
Right.
To be with you. I hear you.
Right.
Let's talk. Sometimes that is the critical part of this whole process, no matter what it is and where it goes. That is such an important first step. And I'm happy to serve an organization that has people who will accompany others on their journey.
Laura, did you have a question? I think you are still, I don't have a way to unmute you, so I don't know. Oh, I'm not the host anymore. Heather, could you make me the host? Oh. That's what's going on.
Is that what's going on? Sorry.
Yeah.
Hang on. I'm going to just, oh, you should take back your hosting. That's what you should do.
And I don't see a way that I can do it. So if you click on my face and make me the host.
I'm trying to do that. Make host. There you go. All right. There you go.
All right. Heather, I have unmuted you, I think.
Laura,
I think I've unmuted you. Nope, we still can't hear you.
No?
I don't know what's up with that.
It's your mic says it's on, Laura. No, come on. You're the music person, you know mics.
So while we wonder what's happening with Laura, I wonder if there's anyone who, for a few minutes, and we don't have to go all the way till 9, but I just wanted to open up the space, because this is when we talk about this, when we talk about these issues, it sometimes is a moment where somebody feels they need to share not a personal story, but something in their congregation, in their congregation's history. Some people who are aware that I gave a Berry Street lecture a while ago, I gave a response to a Berry Street lecture a while ago where we talked about, in part, something that had occurred in one of the congregations I used to serve. I have served 3 Unitarian Universalist congregations in my career, and all 3 of them had a history of professional misconduct by religious professionals. I never thought this was going to be part of my ministry or part of my work, and it's just those are the congregations that have asked me to serve as their minister. So you know, in some ways, I kind of came into the work around helping congregations recover from misconduct, kind of through a circuitous route. But I wanted to open up a space if anyone feels called to name briefly a challenge or 2 that may have occurred in your congregation's past. You don't have to name names. We're not asking for that. I'm just seeing if there's a way that we can normalize that this is part of our experience as Unitarian Universalists. So, Laura, is your mic working now?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
It is. Yes.
Okay. My daughter finally fell asleep, so I could unplug my ears. So I just wanted to lift up the recommendation that everybody has been putting out there a little separately, but it's been really helpful for us to have had not only the disruptive persons policy in place, but also to have been really quick to reach out to our regional support when we've had disruptive persons situations. Not without telling too many details, we did have something happen this fall with someone in the congregation, and it was between congregants. Like Heather, I know you were referring to that as something different, but in that case, the having the policy in place really enabled the board to do their job, to keep referring back to that disruptive persons policy, but also because it was nuanced, this was somebody who, with kind of hints at the Me Too thing, but also hints at this person maybe having or owning weapons, or maybe not being a stable person and being in the congregation. What do you do when that person just comes in on a Sunday morning and you don't know what's going to happen with that person there? So it really was helpful to have not only the documentation in place, but to have had so many meetings with our regional support to kind of point us in a direction to help us to work through it. Because the policy is not the be all end all of what, because they're unique situations. So.
Every situation is unique. That's why it's almost hard to talk about this stuff, because so much is unique. But I absolutely echo that. We've had, I've honestly just in the last week had 2 fairly nasty disruptive person issues that I agree with you. If their church had had a disruptive person policy or behavior policy, if they had reached out to their field staff 2 months ago, they would not be in this situation now. So I'm right in there with you, Laura.
And I want to hold up
Earlier the better.
Christine said that quite a few years ago we developed a disruptive persons policy. We've had 2 or 3 times since where we needed to use it, and I'm very glad we had it. And ditto to what Laura just said. Which I don't know which of those what it was, but so what about, is there anything else that someone's willing to share about challenging times with religious professionals or among congregants that have happened in your congregation? Amber?
I will. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
And Laura,
Okay.
I meant to ask Laura, could you say what congregation you were with, and then we'll ask Amber.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm with the UU Congregation of Fairfax.
Thank you.
Fairfax, Virginia.
Thank you. Amber?
I am with the Southern Unitarian Universalist of Southern Delaware.
In Lewis. Go ahead, Amber.
And yes, I just want to say we had. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Hello. Can you hear? Okay. We had a situation many years ago where a sex offender had come to the congregation without letting us know ahead of time, and there was no policy or anything, and ultimately they were asked to leave. But since then, we've had all kinds of safety policies, so I've been very thankful for that. But one thing that was brought up tonight is the disruptive person within the congregation. We have a disruptive person policy if someone comes in and disrupts service, but we don't have one for if there's a conflict between congregants. So that's a big deal, and that's something I'll definitely be bringing up. So thank you all very much for this. It's been very helpful.
Thank you, Amber. Who else has something that they'd like to share, either an experience or something in your congregation's history? And if there's not, then we might move towards, but I'm leaving the space for just another minute or two before we move towards closing tonight.
I'll share something. This is Christine.
Thank you, Christine.
I can't figure out how to have you see me, but that's okay. You're not missing anything. I'll just share that the disruptive person policy that I just referred to, that we did lean on heavily in a couple cases, the last time that we referred to it, we realized that we had some ambiguous language in it that really kind of got in the way as we tried to proceed through the process. And it specifically had to do with the appeal process. So we had someone who had been involved in a relationship with someone there. They had broken up, and the woman did not want him to be coming around anymore. So it was personally between them, but she didn't want him to come around anymore and made us aware of his behavior toward her and everything. So our initial investigation of it was that we asked him not to come back. But then there was something in our wording about an appeal process that he could come back and appeal it, the decision, and it didn't say how long he had to do that, and he waited like many, many, many months and then came back and was appealing. So I'm just putting that out there as people are creating this or working with their policy, is to be specific and careful about how to word that part of it, because we then, after all this happened, we went back in and made some changes to our policy to put time periods in there very specifically so that that would never happen again.
And I think I know the answer to this question, but Christine, could you remind me which congregation you're with?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thomas Paine Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in outside Collegeville, Pennsylvania.
I was pretty certain I knew what you were talking about.
Sorry about that. But I mean, again, it's not so much about that situation or that person. It's about the fact that the policy had some vagueness to it that really had to be tightened up. And so I'm just putting out there as a word of caution.
Well, and reminded by that, and I am aware of the situation that occurred at Thomas Paine, and there's a dynamic where, this is one of the pieces. We as congregations are in covenant with one another. When you join the association, you covenant with other Unitarian Universalist congregations. And one of the challenging things we often face, especially around disruptive persons, is what happens when someone who has been disruptive in one congregation and is asked to leave, then travels down to the next congregation,
right.
10 miles away, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know that we have an answer to this question about how do congregations speak to each other about their experience of individuals in congregations. And and in the particular case, someone may be that the situations in that one congregation that led to them behaving poorly wouldn't reoccur in another congregation. So it's just naming that this is a place where there is something that we can't solve with a policy across different congregations, but we do have our commitment to be in relationship with each other, to think about how we help other congregations to be able to avoid problems that we've already faced. So any other thoughts, questions? Any other reflections that somebody would like to share?
I have a question, David.
Go, Carrie.
This is Carrie from.
And you can say which congregation?
You use Central Delaware in Dover.
Thank you.
Following up on that, what you just said, how do we communicate with others? We had a disruptive person that came in that wasn't horribly disruptive, but I know from my personal work experience that this person is potentially not stable, and was concerned with what he was doing, that he might be going to other community areas to ask for money for whatever his current quest was, which wasn't realistic at all. How do we deal with that? I mean, we asked him not to come back and everything's been fine, but I expect he'll be back in another year or so, because that's kind of how he cycles.
So one of the, and Heather, you could jump in here too, but one of the things is for this person who comes back every couple of years, because we Unitarian Universalists like to change leadership on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. So people realize that, and they know that if they come back 2 years later, it's a whole different board, or it's a whole different group of leaders. So one of that is good documentation, and helping leaders to be able to pass that information down. The other question is really one about how you be in communication with other, maybe even not UU congregations, but other institutions that you're in relationship with in the community. And that's really about those relationships. Heather, do you have anything you want to jump in with?
Actually, that was just exactly what I was going to say. Yes, it's not even just documenting your own work so that it goes down from board to board, or make sure the administrator in the office has this history. And if she leaves, she passes it on to somebody else so that when this guy shows up the next time, everybody knows what to do right away. I mean, they just immediately tell him, you know, we've had our history with you. You're not welcome here. But also to talk to other congregations. Indeed. If you've got a way to do that, if you have a way to let them.
It's also really good for the staff to be on the same page with issues like this,
Yes.
where there's always a question around who needs to know, and sometimes yes, there are things that have to be confidential, but like with the situation I was just referring to, having the entire staff aware enabled us to have the foresight to say, hey, we're going to be working with this other congregation in a week, and while we have this disruptive persons policy with our congregation, this person could show up at this other congregation, and that's not outside of our language, and that's outside of our jurisdiction, and yet we'll be there and there could be an incident. So that led to not only the staff communicating about that, but then our staff reaching out to the staff of this other congregation to say, we know you can't guarantee anything, no one can in the world, but how can we work together to make our people feel at least a little bit better, knowing that you guys are, in the know. But I think those things are so nuanced, and unless we're trying to make sure that people are on the same page, it's, anyway, 2 cents.
Thank you.
It does. No, thanks, Laura. It helps a lot. And that is true, because there will sometimes not be agreement within staff about how to deal with someone. And that can raise the disruption in the congregation to a whole new level. So that's honestly, that's a call to your regional people.
Yeah, and I think also in today's world, we think about what happens on campus, but there's so many of us that are collaborating and out in the community, because that's where we want to be now, and want to be doing that. But that means that these policies, they don't necessarily apply everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So what other questions or any other reflections or experiences that there might be, whether it's on disruptive persons, or whether it's in safe congregations, or whether it's an experience of having had a religious professional who is misconducted? What do you have? What's live for you in your congregation? And if there's not, we can close a little early tonight if that's useful. This has been great. I want to thank you all for coming and being with us tonight. Thank you, Heather, for making the time and the space to be able to be here and share. Part of my goal was to have people be able to see Heather as a person, and not just a voice on a phone line. So I'm going to close this tonight with a reading, a really short one. I love the hymnal, because this is often a reading that I'll use for congregations when they're going through a difficult time related to a disruptive persons or some other conflict. It's this: take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Wayne Aronson. Go forth in peace, creating peace, and I'll see you all next month for the March Presidents and Leaders Roundtable meeting, which is on March 28th at 7:30 p.m. here in the same location known as Zoom. I'll see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you, David.